communities have struggled with inconsistent water supply, unaffordable costs and poor infrastructure. This, of course, was seen through the Johannesburg water woes having reached a crisis point now. So this week, the city's water entity has been affected by network challenges due to high demand exceeding available capacity supplied by Rand Water. That's the official explanation given. Many of the city's reservoirs and water towers are also running low. So just understand the politics of water and really what is behind all of this. Benoit Leroy, Water Chamber CEO, is going to be joining us for this discussion. Benoit, good morning once again, and thank you for making time to be part of these pertinent discussions. It seems like we're going in circles when we're trying to understand, what is really happening, the progress or the lack thereof. Talk to us about, the issue of leadership that has now come to the fore. It's not boding well ahead of local government elections off the back of SONA as well. We've seen the issues of leadership and calls for the mayor to perhaps, intervene immediately given the mammoth issues that have been faced by Joburg residents. How are you weighing in at this point?
Yeah, I think whether we have a change in leadership or ongoing shuffling of leadership within, let's say, the Gauteng province and the metros, and specifically Johannesburg, we've seen that it's had no impact, whatsoever, because the problems are technical. It's an engineering problem, and we can say what you want on the political front. You can't change the facts, and the facts are that we have something like 37% physical leaks in the Joburg distribution network. Rand Water supplying this doesn't have that. It has about 4 to 5% in the bulk, which is fairly normal. It'll never be down to zero. But what happened is Mfuleni had, I think, 2 power outages because they supply electricity to part of the system that comes out of not Suikerbosch, the big works, the smaller works vereniging. And what happened is, and that caused, a minor issue of half a day or a day caused an issue that we're supposed to have 48 hours. Now, the mayor can say what he wants, whenever he wants, whoever the mayor is from, is that we don't have 48 hours residents. We should have more, seeing that the system's vulnerable. So what happens, these small events become catastrophic. And you see the reservoirs are not recovering very well. Those who were in the red yesterday, only one or two are a little bit going into amber now. So, I always say, the story talks cheap. You need to do workshops. But I must say the communication from the city and the province has improved. It's still got a way to go, but it has improved. So there's a lot of effort going to the communication because, to be honest, there's little else one can do at the moment. Electrical infrastructure's collapsed in Mfuleni, and in Joburg it is collapsing. And this hasn't been addressed either. So, it's the water energy nexus that we're talking about. It's not just energy or just water. Yeah. It's the two are intertwined, and starting to find out how intertwined they are.
No, absolutely. And following SONA, following even the reply, from SONA by the president, even the MPs at large. I mean, we know that prior to all of this, it was announced that a national water crisis committee was going to be set up to address the water issues in the country with experts. And I mean, South Africa being rated as the top 30 driest and water scarce countries around the world. I mean, let's talk to the progress on that front, both the short term and the long term, given that there is now a new administration.
So the irony is, look, a National Crisis Committee is going to do absolutely nothing, in my opinion. I'll tell you why. Because national government published under duress from ourselves and other stakeholders in 2018 the long-lost water and sanitation master plan, and then it said 900 billion needed to be spent until 2028. So over a 10-year period, the fiscus had 2/3, other third would have to come from other sources. We now sit in year 7. We should have spent between 6 and 7 billion. We have only committed 140 billion at national government level. So we're not on our way, and we in actual fact haven't really started. And in there has been bundled the Sutu and the Umpumazi Dam. Those were announced long before that. They were so the Sutu Highlands, the phase 1, 2, 3, 4. We are busy on 2 now. Those were announced in 1980. So let's not stretch too far. So from a national government perspective, we in actual fact not leading. So there is a leadership, issue there. But from the issues we're seeing in Johannesburg and Rand Water, those are really regional and local government issues. So we have ineptitude has set in over time progressively, both at local and national government. And, they both have to work. And
Yes.
they also have to work with stakeholders in the sectors for us to overcome this hiatus. And, we must be very careful. Politicians have a short life. It's normally something like 5 years, generally speaking, between elections. We're not going to sort this out in 5 years. So we need to depoliticize this entire basic services story so that because infrastructure takes between 15 and 30 years to establish. Now, to rectify it, hopefully we can do it in 5 to 10 years. But it does stretch further than the average political life cycle.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at this very differently. I know I've been harping about depoliticizing, but we haven't done it. It's actually getting more political. And I must say, having the mayor, yes, we have executive mayors, etc., which I don't think we should have. We should have non-executive mayors as we have non-executive chairpersons in private industry. But we should have the technical people, the heads of the technical utilities, the water providers, actually lending us their knowledge because they're very knowledgeable people and they need to be telling us what's happening. And that will go towards depoliticizing this because if politicians are not involved, they approve the budgets and we carry on, then at least we would go and get this political machinery, because all it's doing is just delaying things, confusing people, in my opinion anyway.
Well, you're right. The timelines are not matching up, especially when it comes to the election of leaders and perhaps also what's needed for the long term, given the technicality of it all. Back in March of 2024, I know that there was a climate action plan that was announced. Climate change and climate issues are also exacerbating, the speed and the rate at which, infrastructure is failing to withstand the challenges, but also just what communities and residents are experiencing at large. Perhaps you could weigh in on that, the feasibility, but the gaps as well that still pervade. I mean, access to clean and safe water, it's a fundamental human right. It's crucial for human health as well and well-being. Without that, I mean, communities are susceptible to disease, malnutrition, and poverty at large.
So really, since the Romans had it quite well worked out, and all of a sudden had cities that were sort of flourishing. Then we went through the medieval or dark ages, as some of us call it, and then we got through to the first industrial revolution. One of the first things that happened with rapid urbanization was to take the sewage out of the towns and to bring clean water into the towns. And that, in actual fact, all of a sudden, instead of average lifespans of 30 to 35 years old, we're, let's say in the well-established economies, we're running at about 70, 71 years old, up to 80 in certain places, whereas sub-Saharan Africa and other emerging regions are running in the 50 to 60-year-olds. So water and sanitation have a direct impact on our longevity and on the health of our lives, and that stimulates economic activity. So, one of the reasons we believe from a water sector that South Africa is stagnating, if you take the politics out of it, is economically stagnating because we don't have water and sanitation services running anywhere near any benchmark in the world. And being water scarce adds another dimension. But as you mentioned, the climate change is in actual fact, it affects everybody on this earth, but it affects those who are vulnerable more. And our systems are vulnerable. So we are not equipped. We can report what we want. We are not equipped to meet the SDGs. We're not equipped to battle climate change.
Let me come in there because I actually also want to bring in, just for the interest of time, bring in the issue of the high consumption. That was, deemed as the reasons for what occurred this week in Johannesburg. And I know that there's the issue of water leakages. There's water losses that's around 44% of water supply through non-revenue water. That includes stolen water or non-billable water and leaks. So talk to us about the severity of that, how that also needs to be factored in. I know that also there was the average consumption rate that was measured, 279 litres per capita per day. So it is obviously higher than the international average of about 173 litres. How are all these factors weighing in and playing up?
The biggest consumer is the municipalities' leaks. Okay, so Johannesburg is their graphs and the weekly graphs that go to national government at DWS is about 37, 38%, the physical leak side of it. So, that's a huge number. It's over 30. So that's the single biggest consumer. That 237, 279, etc. is an absolutely load of nonsense because that takes non-revenue water into the number. Now, when you're measuring international benchmarks, they have non-revenue water of 5 to 15%. So if you take revenue water out, fiscal leaks, accounting, and all this perceived and non-perceived leaks, we're running between 150 and 200 liters per person. So where the user of water, the real user, not municipalities, so industry, commerce, government, and households are not using that amount of water. And if you look at Cape Town, their average is around about 165, 170 liters per person per day, including non-revenue water. But the non-revenue water is half to a third of what we have up here. So the real issue is not with us. And, it's very difficult to say water when you don't have water. We're fighting that narrative, and it just seems to pop up. It does, it gets up people's backs. And so we need to get away from it. The reality is the infrastructure is consuming water, and we see it. There's no difference between summer and winter. That's because the leaks don't change in summer and winter. Our habits do, but it has no impact, just us.
Well, Benoit, there certainly are more questions than answers at this point. I want to thank you for your time and for weighing in. As always, the conversation continues, but we'll leave it there for now. Benoit Leroy, SA Water Chamber CEO, shining a spotlight on the water issues in South Africa, particularly this week in Johannesburg. We saw the water woes continuing there. Again, thank you to him for joining us once again, the SABC at this hour.